Good morning. So, the Torah portion this week is Noach, Genesis 6:9 to 11:32, the story of Noah and the story of the Tower of Babel. God sees you. God knows every thought. He sees every action. He knows every sin. God knows everything about you. Sometimes we think of the story of Noah as a cute little story for children. We sing cute little songs about it, and treat it as though it was just another story. But it is far from cute. It is the world's greatest tragedy. It's easy to say there were a few 100,000 people who didn't know anything, who lived off the land. I know I thought that way for a long time. According to some scholars, 7 billion people were on the face of the earth at that time. I can imagine it was a lot like today. There were countries, cities, farms and businesses, governments, slaves, workers, rich and poor. They were just like today. We know they were technologically advanced. As we can see in the story of the Tower of Babel, God says anything they put their mind to do, they could do. Yes. We can only assume that they had this knowledge pre-flood as well. This was an entire world full of people going about their day, going to work, coming home, doing the laundry. The only difference was their thoughts were wicked and their actions violent towards one another. Their minds had been so corrupt by sin that they could not see God. Nothing God could do would turn them back to him. Think about how evil a world that would have been. People with minds so corrupt, so evil, so full of hate. God could not save them. The only way to save mankind was to destroy it. We can look back through just the past 100 years of our history and see just how scary things can be, just how cruel and evil people could be. Read any book on the Holocaust or the gulags of Russia or the war between Japan and China, and you will find despicable horrors. The world can be a very evil place. Even through just these dark times in our past 100 years, God never said he was going to destroy the world. It is hard to imagine a time when it was worse than even the worst part of our known history. How must Noah have felt living in such a time? How did he manage to keep his faith in God when no one else was? With all the things happening now and the seeming loss of so many of our freedoms, I know how I feel. I feel like I'm alone, screaming in the darkness, unable to change what is happening and fearing what could happen. I am sure that Noah felt all of this and much more. He really was the only one. He really couldn't change their minds, no matter how hard he tried. He could only trust God and God's plan for him. That is what we must do. We must walk in faith with God, read our Bible every day, and pray without ceasing. We must be a light in the darkness. Preach God's love and kindness, even when no one is listening. We must follow Noah's example and have a faith, unbreakable, unchanging faith. Now, Noah and his family were a light in the darkness. 8 righteous people out of 7 billion. God saw Noah. The Bible tells us that Noah walked with God, and God came to Noah and told him to build an ark that would save mankind and the world. It was 30 cubits long, about 500 feet, and 50 cubits wide, about 83 feet, and 30 cubits tall, about 50 feet. 3 floors, 1 window, 1 door. Noah took his wealth and built the ark. It took 100 years, but he got it completed just as God had instructed. What faith must he have had? God says, build an ark. He is on dry ground, far from enough water to sail it. People must have thought he was crazy. But what a great testament to his faith and a warning to the people around him. He preached for 100 years, showed the actions of his faith in God every day for 100 years. He toiled, was mocked, jeered, teased, and probably worse, for 100 years. Now that is faith. That is patience. That is a love so deep for God. No wonder God chose him. At the end of this 100 years, the ark is finished. The last nail has been hammered in, and it was time to gather the animals, food, and anything else they wanted to bring into the ark. God sent the animals. It is interesting to note that even as the animals were being loaded up, and you know everyone had to be watching, we all would be, they still didn't go, well, maybe we should hedge our bets. Get on board, just in case. Maybe he's right. What do we have to lose? They all still stood outside. They watched, they mocked, they would not listen. Then, when everything was loaded up, all 8 people were inside. God shut the door. Think of how scary that would have been. You're all locked up, snug in the ark. There was 1 window and 1 door, and now that door was shut. Salvation for the world had ended. All that were to be saved are in the ark. All those that were not can't get in. I am sure Noah and his family could hear the screams and wails and pleading from the people outside, begging to get in the ark. I am sure that when they opened the door after the flood, they found claw marks from people trying to get in. Maybe this is why Noah planted a vineyard after the flood. I don't think those sounds would have ever left his mind. I are never alone.